Revealed on this news hour the allegations from a former NSA analyst that President Bush's National Security Agency targeted news organizations for surveillance and even pried into personal records like finance and travel. We asked the Obama White House for its response, and today in our third story we have it. Sort of. We asked the White House specifically what knowledge it now has about illegal NSA spying and what Mr. Obama will do about it. The response, as the president made clear last week, his administration is ensuring that all programs are conducted in accordance with our values and the rule of law. There will be no exceptions. The only faint echo of dissonance, Mr. Bush, too, insisted that all programs were conducted in accordance with our values and the rule of law. The bad news, that leaves us still reliant on the values of those entrusted with enforcing the rule of law. The good news, this time we have a better idea of the better values being brought to bear. Today, Politico.com reported that 3 Clinton veterans who opposed the excessive claim of war powers, Don Johnson, Martin Lederman, and David Barron, will now be running the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel. The office intended to advise on legality rather than rubber stamp as it did under Mr. Bush. All of them condemned the waterboarding rationales generated for Mr. Bush, but are not as uniform on other issues such as whether to prosecute torture. And still unknown is whether Mr. Obama will prosecute anybody at the NSA or higher for their illegal wiretaps, despite his pledge to follow evidence where it leads. And the awkward, inconvenient truth that, as of Wednesday's edition of this news hour, the entire nation has now heard all the evidence a prosecutor might want. Someone is guilty as hell. Joining us tonight on this issue, Jonathan Turley, professor of constitutional law at George Washington University. Thanks for your time again tonight, John.
Hi, Keith.
Let's rewind to the Obama statement. Programs in accordance with our values and the rule of law. How much daylight might there be between that and any of the analogs from the Bush White House?
Not much. First of all, it responds in the future tense. You weren't asking whether he would do these things. Nobody thinks that Obama is George Bush. I think we believe that he's better than these past programs, but people aren't asking about the future. They're asking about the past. It takes a lot to avoid a very simple truism that if true, these would be crimes, and we prosecute crimes. We call people criminals who commit them. It's very easy to say. All you need to have is the principles and the courage to say it.
The claims from Russell Tice, Mr. Bush's admission that he greenlit interrogations that included waterboarding, are these not exactly the kinds of evidence that Mr. Obama said his prosecutors would pursue?
He did, and what's troubling us is that he doesn't simply say the easiest possible thing. That's the conspicuous silence. The easiest thing is to say, I must prosecute war crimes, because we have treaties that obligate us to do that, and any war crimes that we discover will be prosecuted. It's a very easy thing to say. It happens to be the law, and what really scares many of us is that nobody's saying that in the Obama camp.
Let's say some kind of prosecution ensues. How does it get decided whether it's the grunts who did the actual torturing and waterboarding and what else not who get pursued in this, or the people who told them to do it?
Well, Keith, I have very little sympathy for the people that committed this torture. I've heard President Obama say, you know, we don't want talented people at the CIA looking over their shoulders. Well, those talented people in this circumstance would be torturers. But in reality, nobody thinks that they're going to be prosecuted. They have something called an estoppel defense, where they can say that they were told by people like John Yoo and others that what they did was legal. That does not protect the president and vice president, and they're the ones, and the people just below them, who deserve to be investigated. And they must be prosecuted if they've committed war crimes, or we will shred 4 treaties and at least 4 statutes. And the problem here is that it wouldn't make Obama an apologist. It would make him an accessory. He would be preventing the investigation of war crimes. How could he go from that and say that he's all about the rule of law?
The 3 people heading to justice, according to Politico, Mr. Clinton also exceeded constitutional limits on his power, but through essentially loopholes rather than defiance in the outright sense. Should we care about that distinction?
Well, I was no fan of the violations committed by Bill Clinton at the time, but there is a difference. There is a material difference. What George Bush did was unprecedented. He decided that he literally was beyond the law, that he became a government unto himself. He was wrong. The question, though, is whether the Obama administration will now stand by the law wherever it takes him, and that includes possibly to his predecessor. If his predecessor violated the law and particularly committed war crimes, It's going to be something that defines Obama's administration on whether he will stand in the way of the enforcement of those laws.
Lastly, John, tangentially connected to this at best, the issue of politicizing the Justice Department, specifically the firing of the U.S. attorneys, and the House Judiciary Committee today subpoenaed Karl Rove to testify. I seem to recall they've done that before, and the Justice Department sort of just ignored it. Is there a chance this Justice Department is going to enforce that subpoena?
You know, Keith, I think this is one of the most fascinating things that has happened since Obama took the oath, or took it again, and that is that his administration is the one that invokes executive privilege. If he says there is no executive privilege here, we could have an interesting fight where George Bush comes in and says, I'm still claiming executive privilege, when the current president is saying, we don't recognize it. Indeed, Obama's people could prosecute Rove and others, and I think that the federal courts would give much greater weight to the man that's currently in that Oval Office than the guy that just left it.
Yeah, the current executive is the one who gets to decide what executive privilege is. Jonathan Turley of George Washington University. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Keith.